The emergency lights bathed the council chamber in crimson as Admiral Krezer entered through the massive airlock doors. His crystalline body refracted the warning lights into 1,000 dancing shadows across the walls of Viridian Nexus, the neutral station that had served as a meeting ground for the galaxy's powers for over 10,000 years. He was not alone from the opposite entrance. The Seth Collective swarm representative flowed in like liquid mercury, millions of microscopic entities moving as one mind under the designation Overmind Sekroth. Third arrival came through the ceiling port, defying gravity as was the custom of the ancient Vadan hegemony counselor. Loth descended on platforms of bent space-time itself, her 6 eyes gleaming with knowledge accumulated over 90 centuries of life. For the first time in recorded history, all 3 supreme military commanders occupied the same physical space. "We should not be here," Krezer stated, his voice like chimes of breaking glass. "We have no choice," the Seth replied in perfect unison. Thousands of voices speaking as Onavoth said nothing, merely gestured toward the holographic display at the center of the room. The projection activated, showing a star map of the local galactic cluster at the edge, in the region designated as the human quarantine zone. A darkness spread, not the normal black of empty space, but something else entirely, a void that consumed scanner signals and left only silence. 17 of our scout ships, Krezer began, manipulating the display with crystalline fingers. Gone. Disappeared without a single distress call. The Seth Overmind pulsed with agitation. Our reconnaissance swarm, 3 million individual units, linked in quantum entanglement, entered that region 6 cycles ago. All contact ceased simultaneously. The swarm continued, not destroyed. Simply ceased, as if they never existed. Voth finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. The Vadan predictive arrays can see 300 years into any probable future. She paused, her ancient eyes fixed on the void. When we turn our sight toward that darkness, we see nothing, not alternate futures, not probabilities, just static. White noise across every timeline. Krezer's body flickered with the crystalline equivalent of fear. Something is moving in there. Something that should not exist. He added the hologram shifted, showing temporal data. The void had appeared exactly 300 years ago, coinciding with the day the Galactic Council had implemented the Omega Directive against humanity. The humans had been a young species, barely 2 centuries into their space age when they made first contact with the greater galactic community. They came with open hands and curious minds. Eager to learn and share, the Council had welcomed them initially, offering them provisional membership and access to basic interstellar trade routes. But the humans proved too unpredictable. Their capacity for innovation was alarming. Their neural architecture allowed for creative leaps that took other species generations to achieve within 50 years. Human technology began approaching levels that had taken the ZHK 10,000 years to develop more. Concerning was their nature capable of profound compassion one moment and devastating violence the next. They could create beautiful art and terrible weapons with equal enthusiasm. The Council grew afraid secret. Sessions were held. The decision was made: humanity would be contained, their expansion halted, their colonies isolated when the humans resisted, questioning why they alone faced such restrictions. The Council acted. 12 human colony worlds were sterilized in a single night. Earth itself was surrounded by an impenetrable blockade. Humans fought back with a ferocity that shocked the galaxy. Their ships, inferior in every measurable way, employed tactics no one had anticipated. They hacked Seth swarm networks and turned drones against their masters. They developed weapons that shattered Jaw crystalline hulls by exploiting resonance frequencies no one knew existed. They built quantum bombs that collapsed the probability fields. The Vadan relied on the war, lasted 3 years. 3 years of increasingly desperate human resistance against overwhelming odds. Then the Council deployed the Omega Directive, a weapon that existed in classified files so old that its original creators were extinct species. It didn't destroy matter or energy, it folded space itself, creating a pocket dimension and shoving everything human into its ships. Stations, colonies, Earth itself, the entire species. All 17 billion souls vanished in an instant. The Council told itself it was mercy better than extinction. They said the humans would survive in their pocket universe, perhaps even thrive in isolation. 300 years passed. The galaxy moved on. Humanity became a cautionary tale, a footnote in historical archives until 6 months ago. When the void appeared, it started small, Voth explained, expanding the hologram. A dead zone barely a light year across, but it is growing. And it is moving, she added with grim certainty. The projection showed the void's trajectory toward inhabited space, toward the core worlds of all three. Council Powers Krezathur slammed a crystalline fist on the table, creating a sound like a cathedral bell. We send our fleets. We investigate this anomaly, and we destroy whatever emerges. The Seth Overmind rippled in agreement. Combined task force. Unprecedented cooperation. Voth hesitated, her ancient mind calculating probabilities. The predictive arrays show only 2 possible outcomes. Either we send everything we have, or we evacuate the entire galactic arm. There is no middle path. The decision was made within the hour. The HFY Imperium would contribute 312 warships, including their legendary Stellar Hammer-class dreadnoughts. The Seth Collective pledged 290 vessels, ranging from agile strikecraft to massive swarm carriers. The Vadan hegemony, traditionally the most cautious of the 3 powers, committed 245 ships, including quantum battleships that could rewrite local physics. 847 warships in total. 90% of the galaxy's combined military might, the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the Galactic Council. We depart in 48 hours. Krezer announced. Destination: the Shatter Belt, the last known coordinates of humanity's outer colonies. As the 3 commanders finalized their battle plans, none of them noticed the small detail buried in the sensor data. A void wasn't just moving, it was accelerating, and deep within its lightless heart, something ancient stirred, something that remembered betrayal, something that had spent 300 years becoming something new, something that was about to remind the galaxy why you should never corner a human being. The warning klaxons on Viridian Nexus wailed into the void of space, announcing the mobilization of the greatest armada ever assembled. War was coming, but not the kind anyone expected. The armada emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 847 warships, arranged in a 3-dimensional battlesphere that stretched across millions of kilometers. Admiral Krezer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the crystalline monolith designated Pride of Zhukar, and surveyed his forces with satisfaction to his port side. The Seth swarm carriers pulsed with barely contained aggression, their hulls alive with millions of combat drones ready to deploy to starboard. The Vadan quantum battleships bent light around themselves, flickering in and out of visual spectrum as their reality-warping engines hummed with power. All ships reporting ready status. His tactical officer chimed. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum, scanning arrays online. The Shatter Belt spread before them like a graveyard of worlds once. This sector had been home to humanity's most distant colonies, mining stations, research outposts, terraforming projects that dreamed of turning barren rocks into garden worlds. Now it was just debris-shattered planets, broken stations, the skeletal remains of human ambition scattered across the void. And at the center of it all, The anomaly Admiral Krezer's sensors struggled to process what they detected, or rather, what they didn't detect. The void sat at the exact coordinates, like a wound in the fabric of space itself. No heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions, no gravitational distortion, just nothing. A sphere of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow all observation. Overmind Sekra. Deploy reconnaissance swarms. Krezer commanded through the fleet-wide communication channel. The Seth response came instantly. Compliance. Deploying 100,000 units from the swarm carriers. Clouds of microscopic drones launched toward the anomaly. Each one linked to the Overmind's consciousness. Each one a sensory organ of the greater whole. They crossed half the distance to the void before they simply stopped transmitting. No destruction. No interference. Just silence. Vadan forces. Initiate probability scan, Krezer ordered. His voice taking on an edge of concern. Counselor Voth-Os quantum battleships activated their predictive arrays, attempting to calculate all possible futures of the anomaly. The arrays overloaded within seconds, their quantum processors screaming with feedback loops. Impossible. Voth transmitted. The arrays are showing infinite contradictory futures. Every possibility and none. It's as if reality itself is uncertain in that region. Then the void moved not slowly, not gradually, but instantly. One moment stationary, the next moment displaced by exactly 300 kilometers in the direction of the fleet. Krezer felt something he had not experienced in his 2,000-year military career. Primal, instinctive fear. All ships, battle stations, prepared to engage. The void rippled, like water disturbed by something rising from beneath. Something emerged. At first, it appeared small compared to the massive dreadnoughts of the Council fleet, merely 800 meters long. A frigate by capital ship standards, but as Krezer Hess sensors attempted to analyze it, his crystalline form began to resonate with discomfort. The ship's hull was wrong black, but not the black of painted metal or carbon fiber. This was a black that seemed to consume light itself. That hurt to look at directly. Its geometry defied conventional design angles that shouldn't connect did. Surfaces that appeared flat from one perspective became curved from another, and, covering every centimeter of its hull, were symbols human writing, but distorted, shifting. The letters rearranging themselves. Whenever Krezer tried to focus on them, his translation system struggled, finally producing a flickering designation. Shadowfall class Voidbreaker. Unconscious. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Krezer of the Galactic Council Combined Fleet. He transmitted on all frequencies. You are in violation of the quarantine directive. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. No response. The human ship simply sat there, silent and dark. Admiral, the vessel is not broadcasting any identification signals, his sensor officer reported. In fact, it's not broadcasting anything. No engine emissions, no power signatures. Yet it's clearly mobile. Overmind Sekra's voice cut through the command channel. Recommend immediate attack. Overwhelming force. Voth's ancient voice followed, heavy with foreboding. I advise extreme caution. My arrays cannot predict this vessel's capabilities. Krezer made his decision. Shkar forward elements. Fire lance beams, disable that ship. 12 of his most powerful warships unleashed their primary weapons, concentrated beams of coherent energy that could crack the crust of a planet. The beams struck the human vessel and stopped, not absorbed, not reflected, simply stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall half a meter from the hull. The energy dissipated into nothing, leaving the dark ship completely untouched. Then it moved. The human vessel accelerated without any visible thrust, without any apparent means of propulsion. It didn't dodge or evade it. It simply began moving through the fleet. Krez. Thor's tactical display went insane as the ship's trajectory, plotted across his screen, it was heading directly through the center of the fleet formation. along a path that would take it through the densest concentration of warships. All vessels, open fire. Engage with all weapons. The Armada unleashed hell energy beams, kinetic projectiles, plasma torpedoes, quantum destabilizers. Every weapon system the galaxy had developed over millennia fired simultaneously. The human ship phased one moment, it was solid. The next, it flickered like a bad hologram, existing and not existing in the same space. Weapons passed through it as if it were a ghost. Then it solidified again. Now 300 kilometers. Closer and it began to fight back, but calling it. Fighting was like calling a surgeon's scalpel a weapon. Human vessel didn't fire wildly or spray weapons in all directions. It moved with surgical precision, and everywhere it went. Ship's HFY battlecruiser exploded as something invisible cut through its power carrier. Seth carrier tore itself apart as its own combat drones turned on it. Reprogrammed in microseconds, Vadang quantum ship simply ceased to exist. Its probability field collapsed into a single impossible outcome. The human vessel wasn't shooting, it was dismantling. Kreza watched in horror as his tactical display showed ship after ship going dark. The human vessel moved through 3 dimensions like a knife through water. But his sensors detected something else, spatial distortions, suggesting it was moving through other dimensions too. Spaces that, according to known physics, shouldn't exist. All ships, fall back. Retreat formation delta. But the human ship was faster. It accelerated to impossible speeds, leaving afterimages in its wake as it wove through the fleet cruisers. Sensors caught glimpses of its weapons. Things that looked like tears in space. Openings to somewhere else that swallowed entire vessels' energy fields that didn't just disable shields, but inverted them, turning defensive systems into bombs-nanite clouds that disassembled ships at the molecular level. And through it all, the vessel remained silent. No taunts, no demands, no communication, just efficient, clinical destruction. 3 minutes into the engagement, half the fleet was gone at minute 4. Krez. Thor gave the order to abandon ship as something punched through his flagship's primary hull. The last thing his sensors recorded before the pride of Geokar died was a transmission from the human vessel finally. It spoke. The message came not as sound but as pure data, injected directly into every surviving ship's computer system simultaneously. Threat assessment. Minimal. Response. Proportional. Recommendation. Withdraw. Admiral Krez. Thor ejected in his escape pod as his flagship exploded behind him through the pod's small viewport. He watched the human vessel complete its passage through the fleet, 4 minutes and 17 seconds after it emerged. 847 warships had been reduced to debris and lifeless hulls. Human ship paused at the edge of the battlefield, as if considering something, then it simply vanished, folding space around itself and disappearing back into the void. Kreza floated in his escape pod, surrounded by the wreckage of the greatest armada ever assembled, and understood with crystal clarity. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake 300 years ago, and now the bill had come due. The salvage station Epsilon 7 had never been designed for this build to handle standard rescue operations and debris recovery. The small facility now groaned under the weight of 73 survivors pulled from the wreckage of the greatest military disaster in galactic history. Lieutenant Savary of the Ceph Collective sat in the medical bay, her consciousness fragmented across 1,200 individual units instead of the usual 3 million. The rest of her had died in the battle. She could still feel them, phantom connections to parts of herself that no longer existed, like limbs that had been amputated but still ached around her. The other survivors huddled in their own private Hell's A Ziek car pilot, whose crystalline structure had cracked down the middle, creating a permanent harmonic discord in his body. 3 Vaudan officers who stared at nothing, their 6 eyes seeing things that weren't there. They all whispered the same words. Over and over, the ship looked back. It saw us. It knew. The door to the medical bay opened and Council intelligence officers entered. Their faces grim. Director Thalrix, a Zhukar whose body bore the scars of 100 covert operations, approached Savri's containment field. Lieutenant, we need your testimony. Savri's swarm rippled with agitation. You want me to describe how we died? Yes, Thalrix said simply. The Council needs to understand what happened. She laughed. A sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. We were erased. That's what happened. Erased by something that shouldn't exist. But she told them anyway, because some part of her needed to make sense of it. The interrogation room was sterile white. A deliberate choice designed to keep subjects' focus et savistness or spread across the chair they'd provided. Her individual units clustering together for comfort. It started when the vessel emerged from the void. She began. Admiral Krezer ordered the forward elements to fire. The ship had shields, but not like any shield we've ever encountered. She paused, accessing memories that made her individual units recoil. Our weapons didn't bounce off or get absorbed. They just stopped, like hitting a wall that wasn't there. Then it moved. Director Thalrix leaned forward, described the movement pattern. There was no pattern. Savri said that's what made it terrifying. Our tactical computers tried to predict its trajectory, but every calculation was wrong. It phased through space, through other dimensions we couldn't even detect. She accessed deeper memories. The ones that hurt. I was connected to the Overmind during the battle, linked to 3 million units across 290 ships. We had perfect information sharing, quantum entangled consciousness. We should have been able to predict anything, but the human vessel adapted faster than we could think. Her units shuddered in unison. It learned. In real time, it learned. The Zhou fired their lance beams. The ship's shields stopped them. The Seth deployed electromagnetic pulse drones. The ship hacked them before they could activate. The Vadan used quantum destabilizers. The ship collapsed the probability fields into certainties that favored it. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every technological advantage we possessed was analyzed and neutralized. How long did this analysis take? Thalrix asked. Microseconds. Savary replied. It encountered a threat and eliminated it faster than our sensors could register the response. She fell silent for a moment, her units clustering tighter. But the worst part wasn't the destruction. It was the efficiency. The ship didn't hate us. It didn't rage or seek revenge. It just removed obstacles, like a surgeon cutting out diseased tissue. Another intelligence officer, a Vadan named Kethel, spoke up. You mentioned in your initial debrief that the vessel communicated. Savri Yez units pulsed with the memory. Once. Just once, after 3 minutes of combat. It broadcast on all frequencies simultaneously, in every major galactic language, and several dead ones, including ancient human dialects. She recited the message from memory. Threat assessment. Minimal. Response. Proportional. Recommendation. Withdraw. That was when I understood. Savary continued. We weren't fighting a ship. We were being evaluated. Thalrix's crystalline form flickered with concern. What do you mean, evaluated? Savary's consciousness rippled with something between fear and awe. The human vessel was testing the galaxy's military capabilities. Every weapon we fired, every tactic we employed, every technology we deployed, it was gathering data. We thought we were fighting, but we were really just demonstrating everything we had. She paused, accessing the memory that had broken her, in the final moments before my carrier was destroyed. My quantum link connection flickered, just for a microsecond. I touched the edge of the human vessel's network. The room grew deathly quiet. What did you sense? Kethel asked, his ancient voice barely a whisper. Savaris units began to shake. Minds. Millions of them, maybe billions. human and something else, organic and synthetic, flesh and machine and things that were neither and both. They were screaming, not in pain, not in anger, but screaming because they were trying to process existence in too many dimensions at once. The ship wasn't crude, she said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. It was inhabited, haunted by what humanity became. She looked directly at the intelligence officers, her fragmented consciousness pulling together enough to make her point clear. 300 years ago, the Council used the Omega Directive to shove humanity into a pocket dimension. You thought they would die there, isolated and alone. They didn't die. They adapted. They merged with their technology, with their artificial intelligences, with the very fabric of that twisted space. What emerged isn't human anymore. Not in any way we understand, but it's not alien either. It's something new. Something that exists between states of being. Director Thalric stood abruptly, his crystalline body resonating with alarm. Are you saying the entire human species has become like that vessel? No, Savory replied. I'm saying that vessel is just a scout. While I was connected to its network, I felt others, many others, waiting in the dark. Another officer burst into the interrogation room, his movements frantic. Director, we've decoded more of the human vessel's final transmission. There was a second message hidden in quantum encryption. He activated a holographic display, showing lines of text in ancient Earth languages: English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, dozens more. The translation appeared. Beneath, primary objectives. Locate Council responsible parties. Secondary objectives. Assess current galactic military capacity. Assessment complete. Result: minimal threat to primary. Fleet recommendation: proceed with next phase. The room erupted in panic. Savory just sat there, her consciousness finally understanding the full scope of what was coming. The human vessel hadn't been hunting the galaxy. It had been hunting specific individuals, the Council members who had authorized the Omega Directive 300 years ago. But those individuals were long dead. Their successors had inherited their positions and their crimes, and somewhere in the dark between dimensions, humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing its response. They're coming back, Savory whispered. Not to conquer, to judge. Director Thalric looked at the fragmented Seth officer with growing horror. How long do we have? Savory accessed the quantum encrypted data she'd pulled from the human network in that brief moment of connection. The scout vessel was designated unconscious, according to the data fragments I recovered. It's one of 13 advanced ships. The main fleet is still in the pocket dimension, preparing to cross over. She met Thalric's gaze with her scattered consciousness. We have maybe 4 months before they arrive. 4 months to prepare for something we just proved we cannot fight. In the silence that followed, everyone in the room understood the same terrible truth. The galaxy's strongest fleets had lasted 4 minutes against a single scout ship. What hope did they have against an entire fleet of vessels like the Conscience? What hope did they have against humanity itself, transformed into something beyond comprehension by 3 centuries of suffering in a dimension that should have killed them? Outside the interrogation room, automated systems began broadcasting emergency protocols to every Council world. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered the most adaptable species in creation and then left them alone in hell for 300 years. The deep archives beneath the Galactic Council chambers had not been opened in 4,000 years, carved into an asteroid that predated most current civilizations. The vault existed in a pocket of folded space-time that made it nearly impossible to access without specific authorization codes that only 3 beings in the galaxy possessed. Counselor Voth was one of them, her 6 eyes glowed with bioluminescent sorrow as she descended, through layers of security that would kill most intruders. Instantly, force fields, quantum locks, reality anchors that prevented teleportation, and finally, a door made of compressed neutron star material. She placed her ancient hand on the scanner. Voth, Counselor Prime. Authorization code 9 Omega Extinction. The door opened with a sound like reality tearing inside. The Forbidden's archive stretched into darkness. Shelves upon shelves of data crystals containing knowledge deemed too dangerous for the galaxy to know. She moved through the aisles with purpose, heading toward a section marked in the oldest galactic script, Terminated Species Protocols. Behind her, footsteps echoed Admiral Krezer, his crystalline body still cracked from his escape pod's rough landing. Entered alongside what remained of Overmind Sacra. "You summoned us to this place," Krezer said, his voice resonant with suspicion. 3 hours after the worst military defeat in history. "You bring us to a sealed archive because you need to know the truth," Voth replied, pulling a data crystal from its preservation field. "The truth about what we did to humanity." Sacra's fragmented swarm pulsed. "We know what happened. The humans were quarantined for galactic security." "No," Voth said softly. "You know the official story. The sanitized version approved for historical records." She inserted the crystal into a reader, and holographic projections filled the archive chamber. The images showed Earth as it had been 300 years ago, a blue-green jewel orbiting a yellow star, teeming with 8 billion humans and their boundless curiosity. First contact occurred 327 years ago. Voth narrated. "The humans detected our long-range survey probes and sent a delegation in a slower-than-light generation ship. The hologram showed human ambassadors stepping onto a council station, their faces full of wonder and hope. They were so young, so eager to learn." Krezer watched as the historical record played out, the humans requesting information about hyperspace, theory human scientists collaborating with galactic researchers, human artists sharing their culture through music and stories that made even the emotionless Seth swarms pause in appreciation. "They were brilliant," Voth continued. "Within 50 years of first contact, human innovation accelerated at rates that terrified the Council. They didn't just learn our technology, they improved it." The hologram shifted, showing human-designed ships that incorporated principles from a dozen different species, creating hybrids more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen. A human engineer named Sarah Chen redesigned our quantum drives, increasing efficiency by 40%. A human physicist named Yuki Tanaka solved the Seth consciousness transfer problem that had plagued us for millennia. A human child named Marcus Webb wrote poetry that made the Vodam predictive arrays cry. Krezer's crystalline form resonated with confusion. If they were so beneficial, why did we? "Because we were afraid," Voth interrupted. Her ancient voice cracking the hologram changed, showing a classified council session from 302 years. Algokrazither recognized some of the species represented, though their civilizations had long since fallen or evolved into new forms. "The human neural architecture is unique," one counselor stated in the recording. "Their brains operate on principles of controlled chaos, making leaps of intuition that bypass logical progression. They are simultaneously capable of profound compassion and devastating violence." Another added, "A human will die to save a stranger, then turn around and genocide an entire species if they perceive a threat. Most concerning," a third voice said, "is their rate of advancement. Every other species in galactic history has taken 10 to 20,000 years to achieve interstellar civilization. Humans did it in 200, at their current rate. They will surpass all of us within 5 centuries." The recorded debate grew heated. Some counselors argued for integration, for embracing humanity's potential. Others demanded containment in the end. Fear won. The quarantine directive was passed by a vote of 73 to 27. Voth said, quietly, humanity would be restricted to their home system and 3 colony worlds. No expansion. No access to advanced technology. No participation in galactic affairs. The hologram showed the human response peaceful. Protests at first, diplomatic appeals, requests to understand what they had done wrong. We gave them no explanation. Voth said, we simply enforced the quarantine with blockades and weapons. The humans tried to comply for 17 years, but their nature wouldn't allow stagnation. They began finding ways around the restrictions, developing their own technology, creating their own solutions. Then came the night of broken worlds. Voth whispered the hologram showed 12 human colony worlds. One moment they were alive with cities and farms and children playing. The next moment they were glass and ash. 12 planets sterilized in coordinated orbital bombardments. 4 billion humans dead in a single night. Cresither recoiled, his crystalline body screaming with harmonic distress. We did that? The Council did that, Voth confirmed, to send a message, to show humanity the cost of defiance. Sekira's swarm collapsed inward with horror. That's genocide. Yes, Voth agreed. The hologram showed what came next. Humanity's rage. Their remaining ships, inferior and outnumbered, launched themselves at Council forces with suicidal determination. But they weren't just fighting. They were adapting. The war lasted 3 years. Voth continued. 3 years of watching humans do the impossible. The recordings showed human tactics that defied conventional warfare. A single human frigate taking down a G-car battlecruiser by hacking its systems in real time. Human pilots flying through debris fields at speeds that should have killed them, using obstacles as weapons. Human scientists developing quantum viruses that turned Seth swarms against themselves. They were losing, Voth said, but they were learning faster than we could adapt. Every battle made them smarter. Every defeat taught them something new. The Council realized that given enough time, humanity would find a way to win. Krezer stared at the historical records in disbelief. So we used the Omega Directive. Voth nodded slowly, pulling another data crystal from the archive. The Omega Directive was developed 600,000 years ago by a species called the Architects. They created it as a prison for threats too dangerous to destroy, but too valuable to kill. A pocket dimension. A universe unto itself, isolated from normal space-time. The hologram showed the weapon's activation, a massive device, requiring the combined power output of 3 star systems. It fired once, creating a tear in reality itself. Earth, its moon, the remaining human colonies, every human ship, every human station, everything was pulled into the pocket dimension. 17 billion humans vanished in an instant. Space folded over the wound, sealing it. We told ourselves it was mercy, Voth said, her voice breaking. Better than extinction. Better than watching them die. They would survive in their own universe. Perhaps even thrive. We could forget what we did and move on. She looked at Krezer and Sekira with eyes that had witnessed 90 centuries of history. For 300 years, we believed we had made the right choice. The galaxy prospered, peace reigned. The human question was answered, but we were wrong. The hologram shifted to recent data, showing the void that had appeared 6 months ago. The Omega Directive's pocket dimension was supposed to be permanent, an unbreakable prison, but we didn't account for human adaptability. She pulled up Lieutenant Savary's testimony, the fragmented data recovered from her brief connection to the unconscious. Humanity didn't die in that pocket dimension. They survived. They adapted. They evolved. 300 years of isolation in a space that operates on different physical laws. 300 years of suffering and rage and determination. They merged with their technology. with their artificial intelligences, with the fabric of reality itself. They became something new. The hologram showed analysis of the conscience's capabilities, technology that shouldn't exist, physics that violated known laws, a vessel that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And now they're coming back. Law said, not as the young, hopeful species we imprisoned, but as something we created through our cruelty and fear. Krezer's voice was hollow. The conscience was hunting council members. It was looking for those responsible for the genocide. Yes, Voth confirmed, but those counselors are long dead. Their descendants hold their positions now. We inherited their crimes. Sekra's swarm pulsed with desperate calculation. Then we explain. We tell them the truth. We surrender those responsible. They're all dead. Lothi shouted, her ancient composure finally breaking. Everyone who voted for the quarantine directive is gone. Everyone who ordered the orbital bombardments is dust. Everyone who activated the Omega directive has been dead for centuries. She pulled up the final piece of data. The quantum encrypted message from the conscience. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos within minutes of Counselor. Voth's revelation representatives from 217 species shouted, argued, and demanded answers while holographic projections of the forbiddens. Archive's contents played on every screen. Some called for immediate mobilization of whatever military forces remained. Others proposed diplomatic solutions that rang hollow. Even as they spoke, a few simply sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what their predecessors had done. High Chancellor Mortek of the Selner Concordat slammed his gravitic staff against the chamber floor, creating a shockwave that silenced the room. 300 years, he said, his voice cold with fury. 300 years you kept this secret. 300 years we've been living on borrowed time. Voth stood at the center of the chamber, her 9,000-year-old frame seeming to carry every moment of that weight. Yes, she said simply, and now the bill has come due. Admiral Krezer stepped forward, his crystalline body still bearing cracks. From the battle, the military option is suicide. He stated flatly, we sent 90% of our combined forces against one human scout ship. It destroyed us in 4 minutes. The main fleet has 13 advanced vessels and an unknown number of capital ships. Representative Kelsha of the Meridian Union stood, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with agitation. Then we evacuate. We abandon the core worlds and scatter to the galactic rim. To what end? Overmind Sekra's fragmented consciousness asked. The humans have technology that transcends dimensional barriers. There is nowhere in this galaxy we can hide. The chamber descended into argument again, voices rising in panic and desperation. Both let them rage for exactly 7 minutes before she spoke again. There is a third option. The room fell silent. We confess, she said. We take an unarmed vessel to the last known coordinates of the UNS Conscience, and we surrender. Not our weapons, not our territory, but our truth. Mortex's laugh was bitter. You think humanity will show us the mercy we denied them? I think, Vathi said slowly, that humanity deserves to know we acknowledge what was done to them, even if it changes nothing. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. I will go alone if necessary, but I am offering anyone who wishes the chance to face what our ancestors created. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Admiral Kresser stepped forward. I will accompany you. Sekra's swarm flowed toward them, as will I, one by one. Others joined them, not the politicians or the comfortable elites, but survivors of the battle, junior officers who had watched their crews die, engineers who had seen their ships dismantled by 13 beings in total, representing 7 different species. Then we leave immediately. Voth said. The small vessel they chose was barely worthy of the name, a diplomatic courier with no weapons. Minimal shields and engines designed for speed rather than combat. Its hull was painted white. The universal galactic signal for peaceful intent. Voth piloted it herself, refusing to endanger anyone who didn't volunteer for this mission. They traveled for 6 days to reach the coordinates where the conscience had last been detected. The void was waiting. It had grown since the battle, expanding from a sphere of darkness into something that resembled a wound in space itself. Approaching transmission range, Krezer announced from the sensor station. Voth took a deep breath, her ancient lungs pulling in air that suddenly felt too thin. She opened communication channels on every known frequency, broadcasting in every human language that had been recorded before the Omega Directive: English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, Russian, Portuguese, dozens of dead tongues that only existed in historical archives. Unknown human vessels, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. This is Counselor Voth of the Galactic Council. I am here to confess. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 302 years ago, my predecessors in the Council committed genocide against your species. They sterilized 12 of your worlds, killing 4 billion souls. When you fought back, they used the Omega Directive to imprison all 17 billion of you in a pocket dimension. They did this because they were afraid of you, of your potential, of what you might become. Her voice cracked. I am here to tell you that those who gave those orders are dead. They lived their lives in comfort and died peacefully, never facing justice for their crimes. We who remain inherited their positions and their sin. She looked at the void, at the darkness that held whatever humanity had become. If extinction is your judgment for us, we accept it. We will not fight. We will not run. We will not beg. But we wanted you to know that we acknowledge what was done. We acknowledge the crime. We acknowledge your right to rage. And we acknowledge that nothing we say or do can ever make it right. Silence answered her minutes. Past then hours, the small vessel floated in space, vulnerable and alone, while its occupants waited for Judge Krezer monitored the sensors obsessively, watching for any sign of movement from the void. Sekra swarm huddled together, individual units seeking comfort in proximity. Lieutenant Savory, who had volunteered to join them, simply stared at the darkness with her fragmented consciousness. They're not coming, Mortek said after 6 hours. We've wasted. The void rippled not just the conscience this time, but 12 other vessels emerging in perfect formation, each one different, each one wrong in ways that made the sensors scream. With contradictory dataships that existed in multiple dimensions, vessels that seemed to be both solid and ethereal, hulls covered in geometry that hurt to perceive, and at the center, the conscience itself, its black surface absorbing all light. Vath's hands trembled on the controls. This is it, she whispered. The human vessels arranged themselves in a sphere around the diplomatic courier, completely surrounding it. Then they all activated communication channels simultaneously. What came through wasn't sound or data, it was pure meaning, translated directly into the neural tissue of every being on the courier. The sensation was overwhelming, like having someone else's thoughts inserted into your mind. But the message was clear. We did not return for revenge. Voth felt tears forming in her ancient eyes. Then why? The response came as images, sensations, memories not her own. She saw the pocket dimension from the inside, a space that operated on laws of physics that shouldn't exist. She felt 300 years of suffering as humanity struggled to survive in a inane environment that tried to kill. Then with every breath she witnessed the choice humans made to merge with their technology rather than die, to become something new rather than give up. She experienced their rage, their sorrow, their desperate determination to survive, and beneath it all, something else, a signal, a scream in subspace, not coming from humanity, but directed at them. The Omega Directive. The human vessels transmitted. The weapon your council used to imprison us. It's still active. Still broadcasting into subspace. Voth's mind reeled. Broadcasting what? The answer came as a vision of something vast and terrible. Something dwelling in the spaces between dimensions. Attracted by the Omega Directive's unique signature, something ancient and hungry that had been sleeping for eons, something that the weapon had accidentally awakened. We heard the screaming 3 months ago. The transmission continued. We analyzed the signal and traced it back to this dimension. Something is coming, drawn by the weapon you used against us. Something that will consume everything in this galaxy. Krezer's crystalline form resonated with horror. How long? 4 months from our first emergence. The human vessels replied. 2 months from now. Sovereign swarm pulsed with desperate confusion. Why tell us this? Why warn us? The response came heavy with something that might have been sorrow. Might have been weary resignation. Because despite everything you did to us, despite the genocide and the imprisonment and the 3 centuries of hell, we cannot let you die to something worse. We are still human enough for that. The transmission shifted, becoming more complex. Voth felt data flooding into the courier's computers, tactical information, technological specifications, strategic assessments. You killed us once and left us to suffer for 300 years. The human vessel said, now help us save you. We have 2 months to teach you how to fight gods. The conscience moved closer, extending docking umbilicals toward the courier. A voice came through. Human but layered with harmonics of synthetic and exotic matter. Individual yet somehow collective. I am the conscience, once the crew of a human frigate. Now something more. We are the vanguard of what humanity became, and we are offering you a choice. Stand with us against what's coming, or die when it arrives. Either way, the time for secrets and lies is over. Voth looked at her companions, seeing her own decision reflected in their faces. We stand with you, she said. Teach us. The docking umbilicals connected, and the transfer began. Human consciousness, vast and multidimensional, began downloading 300 years of desperate innovation into Council systems. Combat techniques developed in a hostile dimension, weapons designed to fight things that shouldn't exist, tactics for battles in spaces with more than 3 dimensions, and underlying it all, a simple truth. Humanity had returned not as Visitors, conquerors, not as saviors, but as the galaxy's last desperate hope against something far worse than anyone had imagined. As the small courier was pulled into the Conscience's hangar bay, Voth looked out at the 12 other human vessels.